I'm Aubrey Sitterson, and this is SKALD. You're listening to the only story that matters. This is true oral storytelling, written to be performed aloud and then recorded in one single, flawless take. SKALD is an ongoing story, but you don't have to start at the beginning. Feel free to jump in with this episode. And then afterward, you can always go back and check out previous ones, or even pick up the prose volumes on Amazon. This isn't me reading you a story. This is me telling you a story. This is SKALD, part 47. Maul awoke, screaming. Not from his nightmares, not from the creeping horrors that stalked his shattered mindscape, but from something just as familiar to him. Anger, fury, and rage. He woke up screaming, but not at the fates, at the gods, or even at him. He rose from slumber screaming at Xylan. What were you thinking? You could have gotten us killed, and you very nearly did! After the fight with the Grollock, Maul had collapsed on the rocks, eager to rush back into his tormented dreams. The cave wasn't secure. Far from it. There could have been more Grolocks, an entire tribe of that forgotten race that stumbled across the body of their fellow and then prepared themselves to storm up out of the pit, where Maul had unceremoniously tossed that charred, battered corpse. But though the thought weighed heavily on his mind, Maul could not be troubled by it. Because what could he do? What should he do? He could not fight off a single Grollock before. They barely defeated it using the witch's magics and her since-depleted stores of that hungry, liquid flame. What hope did he have against another of those eldritch terrors? What hope did he have against 2 more, 3 more, a score of them? He had none. He had no hope. And though it was a troubling thought, it was not a situation he was unfamiliar with. But if he were to continue his march, if he were to continue stomping across the tundra in search of the cat beast, in search of his beloved pet, in search of Skog, then he would need to rest. With that broken world's dim sun quickly racing across the sky, he knew that any moment spent relocating, spent dragging the monk's dead weight, would be time that wasn't spent sleeping. And what's more, without the monk to guide him, he had no way to know if he was even moving in the right direction. No. He had to sleep. He had to sleep soon, and he had to sleep there, in that gruesome cave, filled with the acrid smoke of burnt hair and flesh. He went to sleep quickly, knowing that once again he was choosing the best of a set of truly dire options. But when he awoke, his body still aching from his fall, his pride still wounded from needing the witch's help, he was furious and ready to take his rage out upon the source of not all of his problems, but the most recent ones. Say something. Say something, you fool! Maul grabbed Xylan by his robes and hoisted him to his feet, as Caleria, unable or perhaps just unwilling to defend the skinny, exhausted monk, simply looked on. "Explain yourself before I lose my patience. Why did you abandon us? You would sacrifice us for a beast? For a fellow beast? What does a beast matter?" Xylan, still suffering from the liquid fire that Caleria had forced through his veins, struggled to even see straight. But still, his senses were keen enough to detect the malice on Maul's breath, the danger in his posture. Xylan opened his mouth to speak, slowly. But as his brain limped to put his feelings into words, to convey the concern he had felt for the lizard, as he struggled to piece it all together into something, anything that would satisfy that growling savage and the grimacing sorceress, he was overcome by his change. The sun had finished its frantic drive across the sky. Its rays had followed it over the horizon, and the only light left in that broken world was the omnipresent, heavy, full moon, the one that reached inside Xylan, reaching deep within that godless monk to find something that had been placed there, or perhaps had always been inside of him, and then the moonlight pulled it out, snarling and snapping its teeth. Maul dropped the monk down upon the stone floor of the cave, roughly, disgusted by Xylan's change, the one that Maul himself had commanded the halfling witch doctors to inflict upon him. But though Maul was repulsed, nauseated by the sight of a man becoming a beast, he refused to let up his line of questioning. "Answer me, beast. What were you thinking?" The only response that Maul, the self-proclaimed king, the one true king of men, received was a rising, pained, psychotic laughter, one that bubbled up from the pit of Xylan's stomach as he sat and spoke. "Why? I can't remember. Beasts don't have a memory. You should know that better than anyone." Xylan grinned wildly. "Or did you forget?" Maul's heavy, broad foot connected full on with Xylan's chest. Not a kick, but a stomp, as one might use to dispatch an insect, some unnamed vermin or other creatures beneath contempt. No sooner had the monk collapsed back upon the ground than Maul had retrieved his cudgel, ready to put an end to the beast's insolence and mockery. But before he could raise it, he heard a voice. He heard the witch's voice. "Wait. Stop." Caleria approached Maul warily, wearily, arms outstretched. "Stop. Stop and think. He's the only one who knows where SKALD is. The tower, my tower, has fallen. We can't go back. Only forward." The sorceress glared at Xylan, who had once again begun giggling, though the rising and falling of his chest clearly pained him. "And he is the only one who can lead us." Maul, massaging his shoulder, the one he had fallen upon after freeing himself from the Grollock, slowly, reluctantly, replaced his cudgel. "You're not wrong." Maul turned from his companions and walked determinedly, limping slightly, toward the cave's entrance. "Come on, then. Quit wasting time." Their march across the tundra was a struggle, more so than even before. They were running low on food and on water. Xylan's body, though emboldened and vitalized by his change, was still racked by the after effects of Calaria's treatment. His blood boiled within his veins, causing his heart to ache and tremble with every beat. And Maul, though he struggled not to show it, was clearly the worse for wear. The fight with the Grollock had taken more out of him than he would care to admit, than he would ever admit, but Calaria could see just how wounded the savage was as he grit his teeth and dragged himself across the wasteland, struggling not to limp. Perhaps it was because of their poor condition, because of Xylan's rapidly deteriorating mental state, and the focus Maul was forced to expend simply upon walking, that they found themselves there, slogging through the wasteland in as best Calaria could tell, meandering circles. It was impossible to be sure. Stranded in an endless, shattered landscape, with an omnipresent, only slightly shifting full moon in the sky above, and having taken as many detours as they had. Calaria could not be sure of what direction they were heading in at any time, especially while also keeping track of the hordes of trolls that moved to surround them. During previous nights, their march had been stressful, but Calaria had grown accustomed to the looming danger of the trolls, those nescient waves of churning green flesh. But now, their situation was less secure, even more precarious, as her wounded, exhausted escorts were less prepared to fend off the trolls' tireless, unceasing assaults. Sorceress had to be on constant lookout, ready to direct the frantic Xylan and the easily distracted Maul to whatever trolls grew bold enough to approach, all of which made it even more difficult for her to track their path through that broken world. But remarkably, they made it through the night. They managed to pick their way amongst the rubble. They managed to follow Xylan's erratic, twitching movements and make progress that, while less than previous nights, was steady and considerable, especially given the party's pitiful state. So when the weak rays of the sun began to creep across the rocks, when the trolls had made their shameful, instinctive retreat, when the monk fell to the ground and in a fit of spasms and convulsions reverted back to his less bestial state, the three sat and partook of their meager rations, devouring what little they had left. And then they laid themselves down upon the rocks. But though they once again slept side by side, Calaria and Xylan were too tired to talk, too tired to do anything but fall into a deep, dreamless, exhausted sleep. For the second dusk in a row, Maul was furious. Caleria was shocked, amazed, impressed really, at the way that the savage was able to emerge from sleep already consumed with the rage and the hate that seemed to dominate his every waking moment. As before, he was furious at Xylan, at the godless monk who had just begun to stagger into wakefulness. No longer was he simply mad at the monk for leaving them, for abandoning them for that lizard. No, now he had something new to rage over. Circles. You've been leading us in circles, you stupid beast! Caleria threw herself between Xylan, who still sat upon the ground, and the charging savage that quickly approached. Out of my way, witch! Has your lust for that giggling monster blinded you to the truth? Maul pointed out to the rocks, to an unremarkable pile of stones that did, in fact, look somewhat familiar to the sorceress. We've been here, passed through here. The monk has no idea where he's leading us. As Caleria squinted out at that pile of rocks, racking her brain to remember what she had seen and when, to conjure up memories of the landscape that weren't filled with trolls, the ones that matched the twilight tundra she found herself surrounded by. Suddenly, heard a gasp and a scuffle behind her. Xylan and its change. Maul cut a wide berth around Caleria. Though he knew that she was without the hungry flame she had brought from the tower, he did not know what other magics she commanded, and he was not eager to find out. So what is it, monk? Did you deceive us? Did you lie to me on purpose? Maul unhooked his cudgel and began to squeeze it so hard that Caleria could see his fingers turn white. Or are you just too stupid? A beast with not enough man left in him to chart a proper course? As Maul began to close in on Xylan, Caleria stood by idly. She knew she couldn't stop Maul, and worst of all, she knew he was right. She had noticed the cyclical nature of their path mere hours before. I think he's right, Xylan. Of course I'm right! Maul roared as he rushed Xylan, moving as quickly as his battered body would carry him, raising his cudgel up above his head and swinging it down toward the seated, bestial monk in a long, vicious arc. When the heavy, charred, notched, and bloody club connected, all it hit was stone. Xylan had recovered more quickly than his companion. His body, though its monstrous transformations, had neutralized the flame that coursed through his arteries and had made him just as quick, just as spry, and just as agile as he had been prior to the lizard's bite. As a result, it was no challenge for him to evade Maul's strike, one that, either by choice or necessity, was far slower, far clumsier than any attack Caleria had seen the savage mete out to the trolls. And before Maul could even lift his cudgel for another attempt, Xylan had scrambled across the tundra. Maul and Caleria, as little as they trusted his sense of direction, rushed to catch up with Xylan. As though they were no longer confident that he could lead them anywhere, they knew that Maul's sluggish attacks could not defend them both. So they followed Xylan as closely as they could manage, as he clambered over rocks upon all fours, letting the darkening air fill with his maniacal cackles. When they caught up with him, they found the twitching, vicious beast sitting in the dust in a rare patch of dirt amongst that rocky landscape. He had his nose down, sniffing, snuffling, giggling to himself over and over again. I found her. I found her. You didn't believe me. You didn't trust me. But I found her. And though the dirt had been disturbed by the wind, by the trolls, by Xylan's twitching snout, Caleria and Maul could see exactly what Xylan had found. A set of tracks. 4 paws that were massive, powerful, and tipped with frightful claws that dug into the earth and scarred the stones beneath it. As they looked down, struggling to make sense of the tracks, Xylan explained. A beast. A humongous, frightful beast. But no lizard. No, this beast smells of fur, of warm blood, and of a searching. It, or should I say, she, was here. She was right here. Xylan pointed at the earth as he choked down his laughter, held it back just enough that he could continue speaking. There was a fight, a struggle, and she fought hard. She struggled mightily, but there were too many of them, too many trolls. Maul, panting heavily, his hands shaking, grabbed Xylan by his fur-covered throat. What happened? What did they do? Why? What else would they do? They took her. Xylan laughed wildly, laughed cruelly as he saw understanding dawn in Maul's eyes. But what does a beast matter? For the first time since they began traveling together, since they left the sorceress's tower, they varied their marching order. Where before Xylan had led them through the darkness, forcing his way through the hordes of trolls with his hideous laughter, now they were led by Maul. The knowledge that they were on the right track, that they hadn't been traveling in circles, or if they had, that it had led them toward what they sought. It invigorated him. Caleria could see Maul limp and hop as he ran, but it didn't appear to slow him at all as he plowed through the darkness, through the rocks, and through the trolls. Though Maul refused to let his injuries hinder him, refused to let his aching legs slow him down, he had no choice but to be impeded by the trolls. There were too many of them. They were packed too tightly to run around, and these were not normal trolls. They were for a time. As night first fell, and Xylan pointed Maul in the direction that his pet, that the cat beast SKALD had been dragged. But as they traveled, as Maul roared and fought his way across the tundra, as Xylan and Caleria rushed to keep pace with him in his frightful charge, a change overcame not just the trolls, but the tundra itself. It looked no different. Not even Xylan's keen eyes could pick up any meaningful changes in the endless spread of shattered rocks that littered that broken world. But even Caleria's comparatively meager sense of smell could detect something different In the air, something dangerous, worried, vicious, and panicked. It wasn't so much a smell, but a tone. One that seemed to affect the trolls in a profound way. As the further they ran, the longer they fought, the more of that 20-hour night they spent on the move. The more intelligent the trolls became. Intelligent wasn't the right word, because they were still ignorant, still mindless dispensers of wanton, senseless destruction. But they, like the trolls who had attempted to take the lizard, they didn't simply exist to destroy, or rather, they existed in order to destroy, but for a purpose. They had an ulterior motive. They had a force that drove them to do something else. To capture Maul. And in all likelihood, that is exactly what saved the savage, what protected the one true king of men, what allowed him to club, punch, kick, and stomp troll after troll after troll upon those red-stained rocks made slick with gore. They had set upon Maul with his destruction, with his death as a singular goal. It would have been impossible for him to resist them, impossible for him to last any more than a moment before he was overrun, not by a horde, but by an army. Instead, that army didn't set upon Maul to kill him. In fact, they didn't seem to attack him at all. They set upon him to capture him. Wielding heavy iron collars and crude chains, not unlike those used to confine the lizard, they circled Maul and threw themselves upon him, threw themselves into the swirling maelstrom of fists, of feet, of a notched cudgel, and curses that, though they were in a language the trolls did not, could not know, still burned their ears to hear them. Calarian Xylan rushed behind Maul, ignored by the trolls that attacked him, the ones that gave their lives willingly but fruitlessly in order to capture the raging savage. They flung themselves at him with a single-mindedness, with a selflessness that would have been noble and had been found in a creature of any kind of intelligence. As though these trolls were demonstrably smarter, able to attack in organized movements, Calaria could tell that they still held the infection. They were still covered in the green, the all-consuming illness that had turned that once vibrant world into a crumbling nightmare of stone. Calaria, overcome with concern over the infection. She was worried that if Maul continued on like he had been, if he continued to embrace the destruction, the murder, the wholesale slaughter of those stupid beasts, that he would inevitably become one of them. But Maul had no such concern. He had no concern for himself. So he gave in, and he fought. Maul was a deadly whirlwind, beating the trolls to the ground with fist and with cudgel, then trampling them with heavy, quickly moving feet, stomping the life out of his nescient attackers. He fought tirelessly, carving out a bloody path through the trolls. He fought because that was all he could do, all he knew how to do. He fought because he had spent far too much of his life imprisoned, far too much of his life restrained, far too much of his life spent tied to a mighty ash tree, starving and unable to move. So now he refused. He refused to be taken captive again. He fought because he would rather die in that forsaken world than live a single moment in chains. And he fought, most importantly, for SKALD. Maul had to find SKALD. He needed her. He needed to find her and be reunited. Reunited with the cub he had rescued. Reunited with the cat that had fed him, nourished him, kept him company throughout his long imprisonment. He needed to find her, his pet, his companion, because he needed her by his side, galloping next to him as he conquered the sundered worlds, sleeping peacefully at his feet as he finally lowered himself down upon his throne, taking his place as the one true king of men, and she taking hers as his pet, his companion, his friend, the only one who would never betray him, who would never forsake him. So he fought on, driven by rage, fury, and thoughts of revenge, as well as, for the first time, something else. Anger was still there. It still consumed him and defined him, still kept him warm, blanketing him from the cold, harsh reality of the world around him. But beneath it, there was something else. For the very first time, the anger was wrapped tightly, almost impenetrably, around something else. Concern, sympathy, thoughts for a being, not himself. So he fought on. Fought so fiercely, so dedicatedly, that he did not notice that the trolls, the ones who once surrounded him in waves of green, now began to step back, now began to simply watch as he forged ahead, meting out death and destruction to anything that came within arm's reach. As the trolls removed themselves from his path, as his way became clear, he began to move faster, began to jog, to run, to sprint, ignoring the pain as he leapt over the shattered rocks of the landscape, as he leaned forward and flew across the tundra. He ran, screaming out an ancient battle cry, a cry that was as deeply ingrained in him as any rage-filled shout. It was the cry of a mother running to her child, of a shepherd rushing to his flock, of a king flying to the aid of his subjects. He would find SKALD. He would rescue her. He would murder anyone who meant her ill. He would choke the life from any who had done her wrong, who had caused her a mere ounce of pain or suffering. His voice swelled as he envisioned his triumph, as he saw his future laid out before him, the future that was his by right, the one promised him by his birth and by him, the one that he had earned through his blood, his tears, and his suffering, through his unending anguish. He saw himself with a crown upon his head, saw himself growing old in his throne, saw himself warmed by a crackling fire, and he saw SKALD, as gray as he was, curled up happily, asleep at his feet. But as he charged ahead, as he clambered over a massive stone, his battle cry faltered, and he failed, because he saw a circle of ravenous, feasting trolls, and in the middle, beneath them, he saw SKALD, saw her body, broken and torn. I hope you're enjoying SKALD. I am immensely proud of it, and I want everyone to hear it, which is why iTunes reviews are so important. Practically everyone has a podcast these days. I've got 2 myself, so the only way for the good ones to stand out is through reviews. Please, if you haven't already, go and leave a review for the show on iTunes. If it's a good one, I might just read it on the air. This one comes from Pants on Head 719. This is a great tale to get lost in. It doesn't prep you or introduce you to the world beforehand, but rather simply throws you into the fray. A dark realm, a mad god, and a twisted hero await you. This is a gritty and excellent story. iTunes reviews are crucial to SKALD's growth. But if you want me to be able to afford to keep the show going, you need to get to patreon.com/SKALD. Patreon is not like Kickstarter. You aren't paying me to go do something. Instead, you're signing up to give small monthly donations to help me do what I'm already doing, writing and telling the only story that matters. Head to patreon.com/SKALD today. Once you've signed up, please come find me on social media. I'm Aubrey Sitterson on Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, and Instagram. Or hit up aubreysitterson.com for links to everything, including SKALD, my upcoming Street Fighter G.I. Joe comic book, my wrestling talk show Straight Shoot, bio, contact information, and more. This week's recommendation doesn't have anything to do with SKALD or even fantasy. It's just something that I really like and always puts me in a good mood. I love Lucy. It's one of the best shows of all time. It's aged terrifically, and it's available on Hulu right now. Seriously, I still get at least 2 belly laughs with every episode. At least! And there are a ton of episodes that I've never even seen before. Check it out the next time you're looking for something short, digestible, and hilarious. Thanks for listening. I'll talk at you next week.